In the early hours of May 5, 2009, a quiet neighborhood in Columbia, Illinois, became the scene of a terrible crime that would shock the entire nation. As the town slept, a man who seemed like a loving husband and father was secretly carrying out a sinister plan. Inside the Coleman home, the soft creak of footsteps on the stairs and the unsettling hiss of red spray paint signaled the start of a nightmare. Sherry Coleman and her two young sons, Garrett and Gavin, were peacefully asleep, completely unaware that their lives were about to be tragically ended by the person they trusted the most. Sherry Ann was born on July 3, 1977, in Berwyn, Illinois, USA, but her family eventually relocated to Florida. Sherry and her brother were raised in a Christian household, guided by their parents' strong faith in Jesus Christ. Sherry was a responsible and disciplined young woman, dedicated to her studies and known for her radiant appearance and bright eyes. During her time in high school in Largo, Florida, she formed a close friendship with a classmate named Tara Lintz. The two girls, almost like sisters, supported each other through the exciting teenage years, filled with music, dances, and shared secrets. However, their paths diverged when Tara had to repeat a grade, while Sherry graduated without any issues in 1996. After graduation, Sherry joined the U.S. Air Force while her family moved back to Illinois. Sherry pursued her military career with enthusiasm, holding on to her dream of someday meeting the love of her life and starting a family that reflected the values she had learned at home. In May 1997, while attending a military training seminar at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas, 19-year-old Sherry met Christopher Coleman. Christopher was born on March 20, 1977, to Ronald and Connie Coleman, a strict evangelical couple. The Colemans had two other sons, but only the name of the youngest, Brad Coleman, is well known. The family's rigid upbringing left little room for leisure. One incident from Christopher's teenage years highlights the influence of his parents' strict rules. After being persuaded by his classmates to drink alcohol for the first time, Christopher was so overwhelmed with guilt that he confessed to his basketball coach. Despite this incident, Christopher was a well-behaved and diligent student who never got into trouble. After high school, he joined the Marine Corps, where he became a skilled dog handler, a role that led him to meet Sherry. The connection between Sherry and Christopher was immediate. Their conversations, shared meals, and mutual goals quickly brought them closer. Within just 3 months of dating, Sherry became pregnant. True to his values, Christopher proposed to her right away. On August 8, 1997, the couple drove to Chicago for the weekend and got married. Their first child, Garrett Coleman, was born on April 30, 1998. The couple settled in a 2-story building in Columbia, Illinois, and on January 25, 2000, welcomed their second son, Gavin Coleman. Life seemed perfect for the young family. Sherry felt incredibly blessed to be a mother, dedicating herself fully to her children, whose laughter and antics brought more joy than she had ever imagined. Christopher's support was crucial, especially as the couple occasionally led financial planning seminars together, Their fortunes improved further when Joyce Meyer, the religious speaker, offered Christopher a job on her security team. Thanks to his hard work and previous connections, Christopher quickly rose through the ranks and eventually became her personal bodyguard, earning an annual salary of around $100,000. Although Christopher's job required frequent travel, taking him away from his family, it also allowed the couple to buy a $200,000 home in 2005. The spacious, well-maintained house was located in the peaceful Columbia Lakes neighborhood in Monroe County, right by a lake. With a 2-story layout and 3 bedrooms, the home became a place where Sherry could focus on her family and volunteer work. In her spare time, she also served as a member of the Destiny Church and participated in a missionary organization. As the months went by, Sherry gradually became more accustomed to her husband's frequent absences. Fortunately, she and her children made friends within their neighborhood, which helped ease the loneliness. Just a few houses down lived Vanessa, whose son, Brandon, was around the same age as Gavin. It didn't take long for Gavin and his older brother to start visiting Brandon regularly, often staying over for sleepovers with their mother's permission. Another neighbor who became close to Christopher was Justin Barlow, a detective sergeant with the Columbia Police Department. Despite the seemingly idyllic life of children's birthday parties, sports events, Sunday barbecues, and the usual bills to pay, Christopher began feeling trapped in a passionless existence. In October 2008, during one of his many work trips to Florida, Christopher decided to reach out to Tara. Although they were no longer as close as they once had been, he and his wife had maintained some contact with Tara out of respect for their past friendship. When they reconnected, Christopher learned that Tara had divorced 4 years earlier. Without children or significant obligations, Tara had attended the University of Tampa and was working as a waitress. Outgoing, fiery, and somewhat wild, Tara quickly captivated Christopher, leading to a passionate affair that began in earnest on November 5, 2008. Upon returning home, Christopher wrote a note on his computer, expressing how meeting Tara had completely changed his life. Tara, however, wasn't satisfied with their sporadic encounters and began pressuring him to leave his wife. Though he shared her desire, Christopher was haunted by the knowledge that his employer, Joyce Meyer, had made it clear that any employee who divorced would face demotion or termination. Considering the significant benefits of his job, this was simply not an option for him. By December 2008, Christopher had devised a much more drastic plan to solve his dilemma: eliminate his family entirely. His first step was to create an email account from which he sent himself threatening messages filled with obscenities, posing as a mysterious stalker who ranted about his boss's ministry, accusing her of dark deeds. He then escalated his plan by sending similar emails to Sherry, warning of a brutal attack on the family, with a particular focus on Christopher himself. Understanding that Joyce Meyer was highly respected worldwide, yet aware that some people generally despise televangelists, Christopher began telling those around him that he was the target of such hatred. To his surprise, Sherry soon became convinced that there were enough fanatics out there and overcame her initial fear. Frustrated and consumed by his infatuation with Tara, Christopher started to lash out at Sherry, complaining that he felt trapped in a life he detested because of her and the children. The once peaceful and harmonious household turned hostile, with Sherry confiding in a few friends about her suffering, even telling them that if anything bad happened to her, they could be sure that Christopher was responsible. Despite the growing tension at home, the couple continued to maintain the appearance of a happy family to their neighbors and acquaintances, while Christopher and Tara's relationship deepened. They even took short trips to Hawaii and Arizona, where they fantasized about their future together. Christopher took steps to remove Sherry's name from the deed to their house, and soon afterward, a new threat arrived, this time in the family's mailbox. The ominous letter was delivered while Christopher was away, terrifying Sherry. She could never have imagined that the person behind these anonymous attacks was her own husband. When Christopher returned, he reported the incident to the police. Justin Barlow, eager to help his neighbors, repositioned his home security camera to cover the Coleman's mailbox, and the Columbia police increased patrols in the area, but no suspicious activity was ever observed. Meanwhile, Christopher did everything he could to keep Tara from leaving him, promising her that he would hand Sherry the divorce papers on May 5, 2009. He even gave Tara an engagement ring, which she accepted with joy. They tentatively planned their wedding for January 2010. Tara registered on wedding websites and began searching for houses for them to move into together. They also planned to take a Caribbean cruise on June 14, 2009, and even discussed baby names for the child they dreamed of having. Christopher documented all these details on his computer, and his phone contained numerous explicit selfies and videos he had exchanged with Tara over the months. By late April 2009, with a clear plan in mind, Christopher purchased a can of red spray paint from a store in St. Louis, keeping the receipt in his desk instead of discarding it. On the night of Monday, May 4, 2009, Garrett, who had just turned 11 4 days earlier, was at Vanessa's house with Gavin. Since Brandon's 9th birthday was the next day, Garrett asked if they could stay over so they could be the first to wish him a happy birthday. Vanessa, smiling from ear to ear, told him to run home, ask his mother, and pack their school bags. Garrett ran back home, but returned shortly after with slumped shoulders. His father had told him it wasn't a suitable occasion and that they needed to be home by 8:30 p.m. Although Vanessa was puzzled and disappointed, she respected their decision, promising the boys they could have a sleepover the following Saturday instead. At the designated time, she and Brandon said goodbye to their neighbors. That evening, Sherry, Garrett, Gavin, and Christopher had dinner together in a tense silence, only interrupted by the usual chatter of the children. A few hours later, in the early hours of Tuesday, May 5, 2009, when everyone was sound asleep, Christopher finally carried out his gruesome plan, leaving behind a horrifying scene with chilling messages spray-painted on the walls. He then got into his car, and as he drove out of the garage, Justin Barlow's security camera captured him. At 5:43 a.m., Christopher began his drive toward southern St. Louis County. Along the way, he dialed his wife's number and left her a voicemail. After that, he sent her a text message and tried calling again as he headed back home. The investigation later revealed that he took a much longer route than usual on his return. By 6:43 a.m., Christopher called Justin Barlow expressing his concern. He mentioned that he had been at the gym and, after finishing his workout, had tried calling Sherry to wake her up, but she hadn't answered. Alarmed by the recent threats the family had received, Justin quickly dressed, contacted his dispatch at the Columbia Police Department, grabbed his gun, handcuffs, and radio, and headed over to check on the Coleman family. When Justin arrived at the Coleman's porch, a police officer was already there. They rang the doorbell, but no one responded. Moving to the back of the house, they noticed a basement window was open. Radioing for backup, they entered the home cautiously, with the police officer leading since he was the only one in uniform. The air inside was thick with the smell of fresh paint, and as they reached the main floor, they saw the source of the odor. Disturbing messages spray-painted in red on the dining room walls and over the frames of the family photos. Just as additional officers arrived, Christopher also pulled up to the scene. The police officer asked him to wait outside, then joined his colleagues inside. But before he could even step over the kitchen threshold, Jason's screams shattered the eerie calm of the house and the neighborhood as he and the other officers discovered the lifeless bodies of Garrett, Gavin, and Sherry on the second floor. All three had ligature marks on their necks. Justin struggled to keep his composure, aware that Christopher might be the person they were looking for. When the officers returned to the street to inform Christopher of the grim discovery, he collapsed to the ground, sobbing and seemingly in shock. Soon after, his father and his boss, Joyce Meyer, arrived and did their best to console him, seating him in an ambulance. Strangely, Christopher never asked what exactly had happened to his family. Christopher was later taken to the police station, where he told investigators that Sherry had been alive when he left the house at 5:45 a.m. to go to the gym. When asked if they had argued the night before, he denied it, claiming that she had fallen asleep in his arms while they watched a movie on the couch. However, the officers noticed scratches on his arms, and when questioned about them, Christopher couldn't explain how he had gotten them. He also revealed that he and Sherry had experienced some marital issues toward the end of 2008, but had resolved them with the help of a therapist. Meanwhile, as the time for school approached, Vanessa finally noticed the police presence outside the Coleman home. Seeing the yellow crime scene tape encircling the house sent a chill down her spine. The once peaceful neighborhood was now the scene of a horrific crime, drawing national attention. Throughout the day, police searched for clues, even sending divers into the nearby lake and examining storm drains. Medical reports, including autopsy results, indicated that the victims had died between 3 o'clock and 5 a.m. Behind the scenes, the Columbia Police Department was determined to do whatever it took to find the person responsible for this brutal attack. Christopher, meanwhile, made arrangements for the funeral and burial to be held in Chester, going back on his initial offer to Sherry's family to have a service in Chicago so that all her relatives could attend. Upset by this, Sherry's mother and brother, who lived in the Chicago suburbs, took legal action to enforce the original plan. Eventually, they reached an agreement that included a funeral in Chester on Saturday, a visitation in the Chicago area on Monday, and a burial planned for Tuesday at Evergreen Cemetery in Chester. On Tuesday, May 12, 2009, family and loved ones gathered to say their final goodbyes to Sherry, Gavin, and Garrett. Later, in a trembling voice, Sherry's mother spoke to the media, expressing hope that their tragedy might save others from similar fates. As the investigation progressed, detectives found it suspicious that the primary target of the supposed threats, Christopher, had somehow emerged unscathed. This was compounded by surveillance footage from the neighbor's security camera, which showed that by the time Christopher left in his car, his family had already been killed, and no one else had entered the house afterward. The idea that someone would target a well-known bodyguard like Christopher also seemed far-fetched. Interviews with Sherry's friends revealed the marital discord, but a crime driven by such motives didn't seem entirely plausible either. Unwilling to leave any stone unturned, the investigation team had a forensic computer expert track Christopher's activities on his laptop, searching for any clues that might expose the truth behind the tragedy. Soon, Christopher's affair with Tara was uncovered, leading detectives to travel to Florida to interview her. When the news leaked to the press, a lawyer hired by Christopher claimed he had no knowledge of anyone by that woman's name. Around that time, Christopher, accompanied by his parents, visited the cemetery. While searching for digital evidence that could link him to the crime, The forensic expert discovered that the anonymous letters had been generated on Christopher's laptop using his work login. Additionally, handwriting experts analyzed the red spray-painted graffiti and concluded that the writing matched Christopher's. Further damning evidence came to light when a detective found a receipt on Christopher's desk for red paint, matching the brand and type used in the crime scene graffiti. When it was finally determined that no DNA other than Christopher's was found on the victims, the investigative team was confident they had their man. As a result, on May 19, 2009, Christopher was arrested, and the following day, May 20, 2009, he was formally charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. Christopher pleaded not guilty. His trial began in mid-April 2011. To ensure impartiality, the jury was selected from another state. Due to the immense media attention and concerns for Christopher's safety, he had to attend the hearings wearing a bulletproof vest. While the jury was shown explicit photographs and messages exchanged between Christopher and his mistress, the judge ruled that certain videos were too obscene to be presented in court. Tara had no choice but to testify during the trial. She arrived at the courthouse dressed in a black skirt and blazer, a fuchsia blouse and high heels, wearing the engagement ring Christopher had given her. For 20 minutes, she detailed their relationship, highlighting the motive suggested by the prosecution. Later, in a recorded testimony, Joyce Meyer told the jury that although Christopher would not have been fired if he had divorced his wife, he could have faced disciplinary action, including termination, if he had committed adultery. Christopher chose to remain silent throughout the trial. After 14 hours of deliberation over 2 days, on May 5, 2011, the jury found him guilty on all counts. Christopher reacted with a look of despair, lowering his head into his hands. His family, appearing somber, immediately left the courtroom and retreated to a nearby room. Meanwhile, Sherry's mother broke down in tears, prompting the judge to warn against outward displays of emotion. Despite this, some relatives and friends of Sherry and her children couldn't help but express their relief. Around 8 p.m., as Christopher was led into the sheriff's vehicle, a crowd of about 150 people cheered along the cordoned-off path from the courthouse exit, with some drivers even honking their car horns in support. Shortly thereafter, during the sentencing hearing, Christopher Coleman was sentenced to 3 concurrent life terms, without the possibility of parole for the murders of Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin Coleman. Outside the courthouse, police officers and officials embraced the victims' families. From prison, Christopher continued to give interviews in which he maintained his innocence, admitting his affair with Tara and acknowledging that it might have harmed him, but he stubbornly clung to the implausible claim that his family was targeted as revenge for his professional association with Joyce Meyer. In March 2019, Christopher's legal team secured a virtual hearing in an attempt to overturn the conviction. However, in July 2020, the judge once again denied the possibility of a new trial. As a result, Christopher remains incarcerated at the Wisconsin Correctional Institution. It seems that, due to his actions and decisions, he will never have the chance to live the life he once longed for. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.
Every day we coexist with evil. We witness the darkest side of human behavior. The The suffering caused by one individual to others is something inherent in our society. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Lucas, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. The case of Sarah Nicole Graham. Sarah Nicole Graham, born on April 1, 1996, in the United States, remains a subject shrouded in mystery as specific details of her birth and early life remain undisclosed. Sarah's upbringing was under the care of her mother in Texas, sharing a joyful childhood with her brother, though their names are absent in the records detailing Sarah's life. Described as a sweet, responsible, and initially shy girl when meeting new individuals, Sarah's spontaneous and lively nature would shine through once she became comfortable. From the information gathered, we learned about her father, Hubert Graham, a direct descendant of the indigenous people of America. This lineage connected Sarah to the Lumbee tribe, predominantly situated in the counties of Robeson, Hoke, and Scotland in North Carolina. The Lumbee tribe emerged from the remnants of extinct tribes, grouping in a recognized area since 1956, when Congress passed the Lumbee Act, officially recognizing them as Native Americans. However, the act also withheld federal recognition benefits, denying them sovereignty, land rights, and other advantages afforded to different tribes. Despite generations of fighting against this discrimination, they remain without a reservation, though they do congregate in a specific area. Pembroke, located in Robeson County, North Carolina, serves as the cultural, economic, and political hub for the Lumbee tribe. Sarah journeyed there in 2014 after finishing high school, possibly aiming to connect with her genealogical roots. At 18, she aspired to relocate to Fairmont, a quaint rural town north of the North Carolina-South Carolina border, to live with her father, Hubert, her stepmother, Connie Graham, and a stepbrother, though details about him remain elusive. By then, Hubert and Connie held positions as assistants to the sheriff of the county, earning them respect within the community. While little is publicly known about Sarah's relationship with her father and stepmother, all signs pointed to her enjoying the newfound connection with her ancestral culture, having grown up in a different state. Upon settling in Fairmont, Sarah eagerly sought employment, quickly landing a job as a receptionist and cashier at Walmart in Pembroke. Her excellent communication skills and friendly demeanor quickly made her an indispensable team member. Sarah was a responsible and kind-hearted young woman, popular among her colleagues, and was beginning to form friendships. In just 2 months of reconnecting with her ethnic roots, Sarah was thriving and genuinely happy. However, on the morning of Wednesday, February 4, 2015, something changed. Although she woke up early and prepared for her 7 a.m. work shift at Walmart, she never arrived. Her supervisor immediately noticed her absence, given her previously consistent punctuality and commitment. That very day, the white Chevrolet van, loaned to her by her father and under his name, was found abandoned. At around 12:15 p.m., police received reports of a seemingly deserted vehicle located several meters from the road, near a cornfield, marking the beginning of a concerning mystery. When the officers approached the area, they were able to confirm that it was indeed the van Sarah usually drove. It was already quite strange that it was parked there, seemingly abandoned and without the young girl in sight. The situation became even murkier when witnesses claimed they had seen the vehicle parked there since 6:45 a.m. This statement set off alarms, as it meant that the van had stopped there just 15 minutes after Sarah had left her house. It was a puzzle that no one could decipher at that moment. The officers inspected the vehicle and the surrounding area for any clues or traces that could guide the investigation into Sarah's whereabouts. However, the task proved difficult. There was no damage to the van, no signs of a struggle around it, and no tracks of shoe prints being dragged on the ground, which could have indicated an abduction. A mysterious aspect of the case revolved around the fact that the van was locked. Speculations were made that someone must have manually locked the door with the car key. However, many older vehicles, like the one Sarah was using, allow the driver to manually lock the doors and close them without using a key. In many cases, cars get locked by accident. With the discovery of the abandoned van, the Fairmont Police Department activated the missing person search protocol. Along with police officers, 140 local volunteers and a canine unit participated. However, there were challenges, the first being that Robeson County is the largest in North Carolina, making the search extensive and primarily in a rural area. As a result, the search was not easy, and even a helicopter had to be used. Concurrently, the process of printing missing person flyers began. Sarah was described on the flyers as a Native American young woman, 5'7" tall, weighing 150 pounds, with short brown hair, wearing corrective glasses and braces. Robeson County has just over 100,000 permanent residents, though it is known to temporarily house many migrant workers. The area also has a rather negative reputation, being known for significant drug trafficking activity. This is due to its strategic location, situated halfway between Miami, Florida, and New York on Interstate 95, making it a popular stop for traffickers. Amidst this scenario, with many people coming and going without proper records or tracking, figuring out what happened to the young girl seemed like a Herculean task. Local and state officials joined the search, but without significant results. A month later, FBI agents joined the search, yet they too were unable to find any trace of Sarah. Her family had no contact with her, nor did they receive ransom demands or any communication from supposed kidnappers asking for favors in exchange for her safe return. The general consensus in the town was that she had vanished into thin air. On March 18, 6 months after Sarah's disappearance, Connie, her stepmother, was dismissed from her position as an assistant at the sheriff's office. She had worked there for 23 years, and her sudden dismissal raised eyebrows and fueled suspicion and rumors. The sheriff announced the news but refused to provide further details, labeling it a personal decision. He also stated that the dismissal was not related to Sarah's disappearance, though this did little to quell public suspicions. In a statement, he also expressed understanding of the public's eagerness for information, but requested patience, stating that releasing specific case details could jeopardize the integrity of the investigation and hinder efforts to find Sarah. He assured that the Robeson County Sheriff's Office detectives, in collaboration with the FBI, were working tirelessly on the case and vowed not to stop until Sarah was found. After Connie's dismissal was made public, sources close to the investigation said that the FBI considered Connie a suspect in the case, adding that an arrest and charges could be forthcoming. Once this information was disseminated, all eyes turned to the Graham residence. However, as time passed, the hypothesis that the stepmother was involved in Sarah's disappearance was never proven. In fact, she was not arrested for questioning, nor were charges brought against her, and she was never named a person of interest. Despite this, public opinion on social media at the time and over the years has consistently suggested that she might be involved. While there hasn't been any official statement, rumors suggested that Connie's son and Sarah's stepbrother was a problematic boy, and that he was responsible for the young girl's disappearance. The rumors spread on social media talked about a romantic interest bordering on obsession from the stepbrother, to which Sarah never responded. On the contrary, she seemed annoyed by his persistence. A year after Sarah's disappearance, there was very little information available about her case. It seemed as if the earth had swallowed her up. On the first anniversary, FBI agents and local officers conducted an operation where they distributed flyers with Sarah's details and images to drivers passing through the area where the teenager's van was found. At that time, the officers insisted that although they had little information about the young girl, who had only been living in the place for 2 months when she disappeared, it was clear that her disappearance was not usual. They stated that she would not have left without notice, and if she had, she would have contacted her parents to at least inform them that she was well and in another place. In December 2018, human remains were found near the railroad tracks about 3 kilometers from the lumber bridge in Riley County. Later, it was determined that they belonged to a female, and immediately, people thought it could be Sarah. On December 13, 2018, it was announced that Sarah's dental records were sent to Riley County to see if there was a match with the young girl. A second set of dental records was sent to the office of the forensic chief medical officer in Riley. However, it was later confirmed that it was not Sarah. In 2022, the Federal Bureau of Investigation made another appeal asking for information to find the teenager, stating that although they had received hundreds of clues, they still needed that missing piece to bring Sarah home. The agent reminded that there is a $5,000 reward for information that leads to finding Sarah's whereabouts. After the video was published, the young girl's father broke the silence he had maintained for years. He expressed his feelings about how the agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, treated him in the case of his daughter Sarah's disappearance. At the time of his statement, he served as chief of the Roland Police Department and mentioned that despite holding that position, he needed to be treated as a father, as Sarah was still his daughter regardless of the circumstances. It is worth remembering that previously, Hubert had worked as a deputy sheriff of another county when his daughter disappeared, and this somehow led to him being viewed very critically and always being under suspicion. Hurt by the whole situation that kept him always in the public eye, despite there being no real evidence against him, Hubert said that over the years, the FBI had barely contacted him in relation to Sarah, and he recalled a call in which they asked him about his daughter's orthodontics due to the finding of some human remains, which ultimately turned out not to be Sarah's, but no one informed him of the results. He found out like any other citizen when the media published the outcome of the investigation of the female remains found near the train. The truth was, in the investigators' opinion, there was someone close to Sarah who was not revealing all the information they had, and this had given rise to numerous rumors and speculations about what had happened. Hubert expressed his deep concern about not knowing anything about his daughter's whereabouts after she came to live with him and his wife 2 months before disappearing. Despite the difficult situation, he maintained hope that Sarah was alive and stated that no one had provided him with solid evidence to indicate otherwise. He clarified that he was not an indifferent father to what had happened and offered his arguments for keeping a low profile. He said that although he had experience as a detective due to his 23 years in law enforcement, he preferred to stay away from the investigation to avoid any perception of influence or interference in the process. However, that didn't seem to work out quite well either, as he then received criticism for being lenient and not offering cooperation. He pointed out that his position was quite difficult, as whether he did or did not do something generated abundant criticism. To the father's statement, the FBI responded in a very institutional way. Through a public affairs specialist, they responded to Hubert's concerns about routine contact in relation to Sarah's case and explained that they had always spoken with the family when there were updates in the investigation, but they would not necessarily make a personal notification for already known information. Despite the pain and uncertainty, Sarah's father shared that there came a point where he had to surrender to God's will and not let worries dominate his life. He affirmed that ultimately God knew best and would handle the situation according to his will, regardless of what the final outcome was. On June 13, 2023, special agents and officers from Robson County conducted a search at the Graham family's home looking for new clues about Sarah's disappearance. The sheriff's office stated at that time that they were doubting the version given by the father and stepmother about the day the young girl was last seen. The statement from the sheriff's office indicated that they had not been able to independently confirm the family's version that Sarah left for work the day she disappeared, which occurred more than 8 years ago. Now, after such a long time has passed since her last sighting, Sarah's case is being reviewed again. In a Facebook post, the sheriff's office confirmed that homicide detectives, the FBI, and a tracker dog from the North Carolina Troopers Association had started a search, although no details were provided about the location where it was taking place. According to the authorities, Sarah is one of several Native American women who have mysteriously disappeared in the same area in recent years. During the summer of 2017, it was reported that 3 women, 2 of them belonging to the North Carolina tribe, were found dead in the city of Lumberton in Robeson County. The cases have not been solved, which has raised fears of the existence of a possible serial killer, according to a news report. Despite this concerning situation, the sheriff's office did not mention any possible connection between these cases and Sarah's disappearance in their statement. The case of Sarah Nicole Graham remains a mystery, leaving her family and community seeking answers for over 8 years. Over time, authorities have conducted thorough investigations and searches, but to this date, there has been no significant breakthrough in the case of Sarah Nicole Graham. The lack of concrete information has led to various theories and speculation, while Sarah's family continues to wait anxiously for the day they can find answers about her whereabouts. Despite the efforts of the authorities, the community's cooperation, and the leads received, Sarah's case remains an unsolved puzzle. Her family continues to cry out for justice and longs for the day when the truth about her disappearance is unveiled. Meanwhile, the memory of Sarah endures in the minds of those who knew and loved her, and the hope of finding her alive persists. As the investigation continues, it is hoped that new leads and developments will shed light on this dark and painful episode, bringing the long-awaited peace and closure to her family and community. And well, that's all for today's case. As always, I appreciate your support of my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. This was another episode of Unreal True Crime. See you soon. Every day we coexist with evil. We witness the darkest side of human behavior. The suffering caused by one individual to others is something inherent in our society. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Lucas, and today I bring you another Unreal True Crime. The West Memphis 3 case. On May 5, 1993, the weather was perfect in the small town of West Memphis, located in Crittenden County, United States. The 3 8-year-old friends were getting ready at their homes to go out and play. The boys had met at Weaver Elementary School, and what brought them together was the local scout group, where all 3 had reached the rank of novice scouts. First, there was Stevie Edward Branch, born on November 26, 1984, the son of Stephen and Pamela Branch. His parents had divorced when he was young, and later his mother married Terry Hobbs. Years later, the family expanded with the birth of his younger sister. Stevie was about 4 feet 2 inches tall, weighed around 64 pounds, and had dark blonde hair. He was an honor student with a promising future, but at that moment, he was just a child. That day, he put on a white shirt and blue jeans, left his house on his black and red bicycle. Second was Christopher Byers, born on June 23, 1984, to parents Melissa DeFeer and Rick Moore. His parents divorced when he was just 4 years old, and shortly after, his mother married John Mark Byers, who adopted him, along with his 13-year-old brother, creating a new family. Christopher was the smallest of the group, standing at about 4 feet, weighing around 51 pounds, and had light brown hair. His physique matched his personality. He was very sweet and innocent. He wore blue pants, dark shoes, a white long-sleeve shirt, and headed to his destination. The group was completed with Michael James Moore, born on July 27, 1984, to parents Todd and Dana Moore, and he had an older sister, Michael was the leader and stood out for his strong personality. He was about 4 feet 2 inches tall, weighed around 77 pounds, and had brown hair. Before leaving, he put on blue pants, a Boy Scout shirt, and a cap from the same organization. He liked wearing the uniform even when he wasn't at Scout meetings. He was a real enthusiast. He rode on his green bicycle to meet Christopher and Stevie. The three boys headed toward the Robin Hood Hills, where they played all afternoon. Around 6:30 p.m., Christopher's stepfather started calling them to come home, but he only heard the echo of his own voice in response. After half an hour of waiting and growing anxious, Mark Byers decided to go to the police station to report the three boys missing. Although the authorities began a search, it had to be limited because it was already very dark, and the trees covered the entire area. Nevertheless, families and neighbors carried out their own search until dawn, but they could not find any trace of the three children. At the break of dawn the next day, the police started a more comprehensive investigation, led by the search and rescue personnel of Crittenden County. They searched every corner of the forest, but they could not find even a single clue. Around 1:45 in the afternoon, just when they thought all hope was lost, they reached the Robin Hood Hills, the wooded area where the boys had last been seen. Officer Steve Jones spotted a black shoe floating in a creek, leading to the largest drainage channel in the hills. He alerted his supervisors, and they acted quickly, searching the area downstream of the ditch. There, they encountered the most shocking sight of their lives. The lifeless bodies of the three children were at the bottom of a lake, having been tied hand and foot with their own shoelaces. Their right ankles were tied to their right wrists behind their backs, and the same was done with their left legs and arms. The horror did not end there. Both Michael and Steve had bruises all over their bodies. Christopher, on the other hand, had bruises and abrasions on various parts of his body, as well as cuts on his private parts and bite marks. However, this was not of particular attention to the detectives. No one could understand the magnitude of the crime. It had been perpetrated with a cruelty that transcended human limits. At the bottom of the same muddy ditch, wrapped around sticks, they found the children's clothing. Most of the garments were inside out, as if they had been hastily removed. Something that particularly caught the detectives' attention was that the underwear of two of the children was nowhere to be found, and one pair of pants had traces of fluid, leading to speculation about a possible motive of sexual assault. However, before drawing any conclusions, they had to wait for the forensic analysis. The case was just beginning. The investigation process was hindered because the officers had removed the bodies from where they were found before the forensic scientists arrived to conduct the pertinent studies. The crime scene was contaminated, as the chief of police was continuously smoking, throwing cigarette butts into the ditch. The autopsies indicated that Christopher died from multiple wounds that caused him to bleed out, while Stevie and Michael died from drowning in the ditch. The autopsies indicated that Christopher died from multiple wounds that caused him to bleed out, while Stevie and Michael died from drowning in the ditch. The hypothesis of sexual abuse was discarded because the studies showed that the wounds were the result of a knife attack, and there were no signs of sexual abuse on the bodies of the minors. Speculation began about the possibility that the children had been attacked somewhere near the woods and then murdered in the ditch. Christopher's autopsy stood out from the rest. He was the only victim with drugs present in his system, specifically Ritalin. While the boy took the medication daily due to his attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, the dose found in him corresponded to a level higher than that indicated by his therapist. The details emerging from the case were increasingly disturbing, and the townspeople grew more and more anxious, exerting pressure on the police. They were desperate for a quick resolution and a culprit to blame. Suddenly, it seemed as if a light had been shown on a potential suspect, a teenager who seemed to fit the criminal profile. His name was Damien Eccles. He was 18 years old and had a substantial record of minor offenses, such as vandalism and theft. He had dropped out of high school and had been institutionalized due to mental health issues. The police, who had been speculating for some time, saw him as the perfect scapegoat. Eccles was always attracting too much attention with his heavy metal band fandom, his interest in pagan religion, his dark clothing, and his black hair, making the townspeople feel scandalized whenever they saw him. His family, being from a lower social class and having had interactions with social services on several occasions, was also known to the police. On May 7, 1993, Eccles was interrogated for the first time. He denied knowing the 3 murdered children or having anything to do with the case. He even agreed to a polygraph test, which suggested that he was innocent. However, prejudices persisted, and there was no concrete evidence against him. Despite this, the media and the entire town had already deemed him guilty. Public opinion alone was not enough to close the case. The manager of Bojangles, a local restaurant, contacted the police for the second time that week. After seeing the case on television, he believed there might be a connection to an incident that had occurred at his restaurant on May 5th, near where the bodies were discovered. At 8:40 p.m. on the day of the children's disappearance, he had called the West Memphis Police Department to report a strange incident. A man with brown hair had entered the restaurant, covered in blood, with muddy feet, a bruised arm, and appearing disoriented. He had then gone into the women's bathroom. A few minutes later, the man left the restaurant, and the employees discovered blood smeared on the walls of the bathroom. Officer Regina Meek responded to the call, speaking to the manager through a drive-through window. She didn't seem particularly concerned about the information and left without checking the bathroom. After the manager's second call, Detective Bryn Ridge and Sergeant Mike Allen returned to the restaurant, this time with a more proactive approach. They collected scrapings of the blood from the bathroom wall, but did not bother to question the other employees about the incident. The scrapings were never sent to a crime lab for analysis and were later declared lost. The lead was dismissed because the prosecutor argued that it was completely absurd to think that the person who committed the murders and took great care to hide the bodies, clothes, and bikes of the children would enter a public place covered in blood. Moreover, the injuries would have made it very difficult for one person to have killed all 3 boys alone. The police were desperate for someone to bear witness to the crime that they believed Eccles had committed. They interrogated Jesse Miskelly Jr., a 16-year-old with a mental disability, for 12 hours without the presence of his parents or an attorney. After numerous twists and turns, Miskelly implicated himself, Eccles, and Jason Baldwin in the crime, despite not having any connection to Eccles. However, his statement was inconsistent with the forensic evidence, as he described the boys being tied up with an industrial rope, whereas they were actually bound with their own shoelaces. Within a few hours, Miskelly retracted his statement, even providing an alibi that he was in another town watching a wrestling match on the night of the murders. But it was too late. The police had what they needed: 3 perfect suspects, capable of creating 3 distinct knots to subdue the victims, just as the crime scene suggested. The media frenzy that ensued portrayed the 3 suspects as guilty, further fueled by the satanic panic phenomenon sweeping across the United States at the time, where heinous crimes were often associated with devil worship and the resurgence of cults. The West Memphis authorities crafted a strong narrative against the 3 young men, labeling them as outcasts who had committed the murders as part of a satanic ritual. When Eccles' home was searched, a book with a pentagram on the cover was found. The police saw this as sufficient evidence to claim that the 3 teenagers were involved in a black magic cult, shaping the narrative they wanted to impose on the public consciousness. People began to come forward claiming they had seen Eccles near the crime scene. Detectives managed to interview 2 girls aged 12 and 15 who claimed they had heard Damien confess to the murders. An anonymous statement claimed to have seen Eccles covered in mud on the night the children disappeared. However, the real lead was provided by a woman named Vicki Hutchison. She said her son Aaron, who sometimes played with the 3 young victims, had seen strange things in the woods. Nonetheless, her statement was dismissed due to its lack of solidity. Vicki didn't give up and provided a second statement in which she claimed to have seen the teenagers performing a ritual, which later turned into debauchery, on the same night the victims disappeared. She alleged that the teenagers had abused the boys. However, there was no evidence of this on any of the bodies, and her testimony was extremely odd. Vicky committed to gathering more evidence and invited Damien to her home for a conversation. She hid a microphone and recorded every second of their talk. However, the young man didn't say anything that could be used against him. Frustrated by the lack of evidence, the police stated that the tape was inaudible, but didn't prove Eccles' innocence under any circumstances. Both he and Jason were arrested on June 3 of that same year. Jesse Miskelly Jr. was tried separately from the other two accused, providing several statements that did not match the facts narrated by the prosecution. The trial was heated, and an expert on false confessions stated that the young man had suffered from police coercion. They had taken advantage of his mental condition to tell him a version of the crime, and he ended up believing it. However, none of this was taken into account when delivering the sentence. On February 5, 1994, Miskelly was convicted of 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree murder. Although he avoided the death penalty, the judge sentenced him to life imprisonment plus 40 years. The trial of Eccles and Baldwin was as scandalous as their companions. Evidence used included Stephen King books, black metal band flags, and song lyrics written on the walls of the accused rooms. The verdict was emphatic. The young men were part of a satanic cult and had murdered the children to carry out a ritual. Fibers and a knife found by divers in a lake behind Baldwin's house were also presented as evidence. However, it couldn't be proven that any of these items belonged to the accused youths. It was circumstantial evidence, and they were not given the right to appeal. Much of the evidence that the defense attorneys hoped to present was excluded by the judge. Eccles was sentenced to death by lethal injection for being the mastermind of the crimes, while Baldwin was sentenced to life imprisonment. When asked if there was any reason why the sentence should not be pronounced, Baldwin reaffirmed his innocence. Eccles, completely devastated, shook his head. The execution date was scheduled for May 5, 1994, but nothing was that simple. For the victims' families, the sentence had been handed down too quickly, and there were unresolved issues, which began the most mediatic part of the case, attracting the attention of the most unexpected figures. The young men were already known throughout the country as the West Memphis Three. The case aroused the interest of several prominent figures in the music world, whom Eccles and Baldwin listened to. Among them was Pearl Jam's lead singer, Eddie Vedder, who helped raise money for their legal defense. Natalie Maines, the lead singer of the Dixie Chicks, also joined the cause of the trio. The metal band Corrosion of Conformity included a song inspired by the case called Free the Three in their album Wise Blood. But it wasn't just musicians who were part of the media defense. The young men also received support from Johnny Depp and several film directors. In 2007, with significantly more advanced technology, new DNA tests were conducted. These tests showed that there was no trace of the 3 accused on the bodies of the children. The bite marks also did not match any of them. Most shockingly, the results suggested the presence of other individuals at the crime scene. A hair found on one of the shoelaces of Michael Moore was consistent with the DNA of Terry Hobbs, Stevie Branch's stepfather. Hobbs had a criminal record and was known in the town for having a long history of mistreatment, including assaulting his wife, allegations of hitting minors, and attacks on neighbors. Another hair found near the crime scene on a tree stump was consistent with the DNA of a friend of Hobbs, named David Jacoby. Both claimed to have been together on the night of the murders. Hobbs emphasized that he believed the guilty parties were already behind bars. However, 3 witnesses presented sworn statements claiming they saw Hobbs with the children on the night they disappeared. The police did not initiate legal actions against him, but the media did. Peter Jackson, the renowned director, began producing a documentary with the goal of reconstructing the events, pointing at Stevie's stepfather as the murderer. New testimonies were collected. Jo Lynn Mackay, Michael Moore's mother, claimed she saw Hobbs washing clothes on the night of the murders, presumably to clean mud off his clothes. Additionally, A cherished pocket knife belonging to Stevie, which he almost always carried with him, was later found among Hobbs' possessions. Finally, and perhaps most damningly, 3 young men claimed that a nephew of Hobbs told them his uncle had been the murderer, but it was a family secret. Opinions among the victims' families began to diverge. The stepfather of Christopher Byers started to suspect Hobbs, even calling him a child murderer. However, Todd Moore believed that the evidence against Hobbs was not convincing. He pointed out that his son spent a lot of time at Stevie's house and could have easily picked up a hair with DNA on his shoelaces on one of those occasions. The tipping point came with the reappearance of Vicky Hutchison, who admitted that she had agreed to collaborate with the police in exchange for a $30,000 reward. She was supposed to provide false information to implicate Eccles. This revelation indicated it was time to redeem the West Memphis Three. In 2010, 17 years after the crime, the Arkansas Supreme Court ordered that the DNA evidence must lead to a new trial. The West Memphis Three reached an agreement with the prosecution, adhering to the Alford plea, which allowed them to assert their innocence, while acknowledging that the prosecution had enough evidence to convict them. On August 19, 2011, they were released on a suspended sentence of 10 years, after having spent 18 years in prison. However, they remain on probation and could be incarcerated again for more than 21 years if they reoffend. The procedure allowed the accused to freely express that they are innocent, even though their official record still lists them as guilty. In interviews given after their release, Baldwin stated that he had been reluctant to plead guilty to crimes he did not commit, but he did so to spare Eccles from the death penalty. Although the families of 2 of the victims came to believe that the trio was innocent, a spectator shouted "murderers" at the 3 as they left the courthouse. It would be very difficult to undo the scandal that the West Memphis police had constructed. In a press conference, the 3, now adults, stated that their main concern was clearing their names. In 2013, a new version of the story emerged from Billy Wayne Stewart, a self-confessed drug dealer, and Benny Guy, a convicted felon. The story was not firsthand, but had reached them through Buddy Lucas, a teenager from the town. On May 5, 1993, Buddy had gone out with Terry Hobbs, David Jacoby, and his friend John Mark Byers to buy marijuana from Stewart. They then got into Hobbs' truck and drove around the city, smoking and drinking whiskey. They reached a wooded area, and at that moment, Hobbs asked the 2 teenagers to get out and fight while he and Jacoby watched in a fetishistic act. It was unclear whether this led to any intimate activity. During the course of that afternoon, Christopher Byers, Michael Moore, and Stevie Branch appeared on their bicycles. Upon realizing they were witnessing something they shouldn't, they decided to leave, but it was too late. Hobbs shouted at his companions to stop the boys, while Jacoby hit one of them. That's when the attack occurred, resulting in the mutilation of Christopher's genitals. The other boys had seen too much, so they decided to kill them all. The clothing and bodies of the boys were collected and dragged to the water, and their bicycles were thrown into the swamp. According to Stewart, when he tried to call the West Memphis police investigator to tell him Buddy Lucas' story, he didn't even bother to return the calls. These statements are public knowledge, but the case remains closed. It is unclear if the authorities prefer to leave the case as a collective myth rather than seeking true justice for the victims and their families. And well, that brings us to the end of today's case. As always, I appreciate your support for my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. This was another Unreal True Crime. See you soon. Every day we coexist with evil. We witness the darkest side of human behavior. The suffering caused by one individual to others is something inherent in our society. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Lucas, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. The case of Maria Fernanda Sanchez. Maria Fernanda Sanchez, also affectionately known as Mafi, was born in the late 1990s in the warm state of Querétaro, Mexico. She was the daughter of Javier Sanchez and Carolina Castaneda, who quickly realized that she would be a source of joy and vitality in their lives. Mafi stood out from an early age, exhibiting an extroverted personality that paired well with her passion for travel, allowing her to easily make new acquaintances. She also had a deep love for music, which added a charming touch to her character. Over time, Mafi discovered the magic of yoga, a discipline that she believed helped connect her with her inner self, bringing her peace that was visible in her appearance and her ever-present genuine smile. Her thirst for knowledge led her to seek out new experiences and embrace every opportunity to learn. Mafi was a diligent student, resulting in a strong academic foundation. She chose to study communication and digital media at the Instituto Tecnológico de Estudios Superiores Monterrey. Her resume was impressive, boasting certifications in video editing and special effects from the Academia Arte C8, as well as digital marketing. From a young age, Mafi demonstrated ingenuity, an innate quality that she enhanced by pouring passion into anything that could elevate her creativity. These favorable conditions made it no surprise that she excelled in digital content creation, photography, and video editing. Mafi was the soul behind Mesh Productions, a small production house she created that reflected her passion for audiovisual production, visible through her social media presence. Her professional journey also included a role as a journalist at a magazine from 2018 to 2021, where she helped to increase the presence and prestige of her alma mater through social media content and contributed to educational note writing for Conecta. Between 2020 and 2022, Mafi interned in innovation and digital marketing at Kellogg's Company, also taking on a leadership role as the director of editing and production at Emporio Estudio, where she worked on projects for well-known companies. In February of 2023, the next chapter of her life brought her to Germany to pursue a master's degree in new media design at the European University of Applied Sciences. Ever enthusiastic to acquire new knowledge and meet new people, Mafi settled in a modest apartment in the Berlin district of Treptow-Köpenick, maintaining her sociable spirit and contagious joy. Despite feeling the impact of the distance from her homeland, she stayed connected with her family through phone and video calls, sharing her excitement about her new experiences and friendships. However, in July of 2023, a post in a group for Latinas in Germany on a well-known social network revealed a sign of vulnerability. Mafi was seeking a Spanish-speaking psychologist as she was going through a very difficult time. Like anyone away from home, although she had chosen to go abroad for personal growth, Mafi was also facing her own challenges. Despite new friendships and adventures in Germany, she began to feel a deep longing for her home, family, and culture. Mafi's life took a dark turn on Saturday, July 22, 2023. Although she had planned to attend the annual LGBTQ community celebration in Berlin, she decided at the last moment to stay in her apartment to work on an academic project. This wasn't out of character for her, as she had always been very responsible, especially when it came to her studies. Despite the allure of the celebration, she chose to fulfill her duties. Just before noon, Mafi spoke with her family in Mexico. The conversation was like any other day, but it turned out to be their last. After this seemingly normal interaction, Mafi left her room in the student residence in Treptow-Köpenick, disappearing without a trace. The following Sunday was unusually quiet from Mafi's end, which seemed strange to her family. They thought she might be busy or resting, but as the hours passed and she didn't respond to her family's regular calls, their worry increased. They tried to remain calm and ward off dark thoughts, but anxiety started to take over. Finally, on Monday, July 24. Concern turned into action, and Maffey's family contacted the authorities at the student residences to request they check on her apartment to ensure everything was all right. The state in which they found Maffey's room turned into a perplexing mystery. First and foremost, Maffey was not there, and bizarrely, her cell phone was left on her bed, while the door to the inner courtyard was left open. These details were utterly enigmatic and led the residence administrators to alert the authorities, resulting in an immediate and extensive search. The European University of Applied Sciences, aware of the gravity of the situation, offered its support to the family and closely collaborated with the authorities in the search for Maffey. Through a statement, one of her teachers expressed the academic community's dismay at the student's disappearance and highlighted the coordinated efforts to find her. Concern peaked on July 25 when Maffey's parents, Javier and Carolina, traveled to Berlin, marking the start of an international search. The authorities issued a missing person notice, requesting any information that could shed light on her whereabouts. Although the police considered the possibility that Maffey might be facing emotional vulnerabilities, this theory was discredited by her friends and family, who emphasized that she had seemed happy and normal in the days leading up to her disappearance. Maffey's image, disseminated through a social media account created by her parents named Find Maffey Berlin, depicted a 24-year-old woman, approximately 1.53 meters tall, weighing 48 kilograms, with long brown hair and tattoos decorating her arms. 3 days into an intense mobilization led by Maffey's family, the Mexican embassy in Germany announced its full involvement in the case. A national search protocol was then implemented in a desperate attempt to find the young woman. The Mexican ambassador in Germany used his personal social media account to express his distress and urged empathy and generosity towards those who are far from their loved ones, striving to excel in an environment with a different language and customs than those of their childhood. On July 26, consular authorities announced the implementation of the protection protocol, known as Search for Nationals. This protocol involved coordination between the Mexican and German authorities, aiming to cross-check information from hospitals, schools, and even morgues, with testimonials, persons of interest, and security camera footage. However, nothing seemed to yield results. The search intensified on July 27, when the police began to explore canals and ponds in the region. Equipped with search dogs and divers, the search operations unfolded on multiple fronts, and civil society volunteer groups organized through social media to search for Maffey on streets and in public squares. They distributed flyers and pamphlets with Maffey's image and details, leaving notices in wooded areas and urban spaces alike. Meanwhile, a poster with Maffey's image was shared on social media and spread throughout Berlin, thus multiplying the efforts to find her. As the mobilized public continued their relentless search, additional snippets of information were shared online. According to those close to the young woman, Maffey's room appeared to have been rummaged through before the authorities' arrival. While the police did not confirm this detail, Maffey's father, Javier, shared in an interview that his daughter lived in a ground-floor apartment with a balcony facing the street, and the door to her apartment was inexplicably open. 5 days since Maffey left her apartment, despite the lack of concrete information, the family maintained their optimism and hope. Her father pointed out that they believed the young woman was still in Berlin, as they had not been informed by the authorities whether her passport was among her belongings. On the same day, the family issued a statement thanking Maffey's University and the organized civil society for their support. While they shared their gratitude, they underscored the importance of keeping certain aspects of the case confidential to avoid hindering the investigation. Javier revealed that his daughter had plans to move to Spain in the coming days to meet up with her boyfriend, a young man she had recently met and with whom she was starting a relationship. The boyfriend's solidarity was demonstrated by his travel from Spain to Berlin to contribute to the search for Maffey. Despite the efforts on July 31, the Berlin police reported that they had still not obtained any relevant information that could reveal Maffey's whereabouts, who had now been missing for 9 days. Up to that point, The collected evidence had not shed light on her location, and uncertainty still prevailed. On the same day, Mexican president announced his intention to seek help from his German counterpart to collaborate in the search for Maffei. Days passed slowly as Maffei's family fought to bring visibility to the case of their missing daughter, participating in various interviews to shed light on the baffling situation. In a conversation with a renowned Mexican journalist, Javier, Maria Fernandez's father, shared the challenges they had encountered in the search. He explained that in Germany, due to personal data protection laws, cameras are not allowed to film public places, complicating the tracking of clues. He also revealed the small size of the missing persons department in Germany and how the detective in charge of the case in Berlin faced an overwhelming task. Regarding the Mexican authorities, Javier shared that they had received support and had been offered psychological assistance. The Mexican authorities referred to the case as atypical due to the time elapsed and the circumstances surrounding the disappearance. He added that the family was working on issuing a yellow notice through Interpol, hoping to extend the search beyond the borders of Germany and Mexico. Despite the many tears shed, he said they maintained strength and a positive attitude in their quest to find their daughter amid the difficulties and uncertainty surrounding the case. Desperation and uncertainty lingered as the days passed without news of Maffei. On August 3rd, following exhaustive searches and without encouraging results, Interpol issued a yellow notice for her location practically worldwide. Although authorities considered it unlikely that she had left Germany or the Shenzhen area, this measure reflected the determination to find her. On Friday, August 4th, a spokesperson for the Berlin police shared in an interview with local media that they had verified her possible whereabouts and were closely following up on the received information. However, the lack of details left everyone in suspense. While the Berlin police had gathered up to 120 clues about Maffei's disappearance, concrete evidence that could lead to her exact location remained elusive. Meanwhile, on Saturday, August 5th, the young woman's parents organized a solidarity event in front of the Mexican embassy in Berlin. About 200 young Berliners, dressed in white and carrying lit candles and messages of encouragement, gathered to keep the search alive and show their support for the family. In the midst of this emotional scene, the feared news arrived in the early afternoon. Maffei's lifeless body had been found floating in a canal in Berlin. The search for Maria Fernandez Sanchez had come to a tragic end. Heartbroken, her loved ones confirmed the tragic outcome. Despite the search efforts and the maintained hope, the reality was unrelenting. It was revealed that the student's body had been found by a person walking across a bridge. Although authorities had previously searched the area with divers, it was later explained that the canal was extensive and its waters had hidden the tragic secret. The community gathered in mourning and solidarity, but also to demand answers. The search took a dark turn as it entered a new phase, determining the circumstances surrounding the young woman's death. Meanwhile, the police stated that there was no suspicion of third-party involvement and reiterated that the investigation was ongoing. The Mexican ambassador in Germany shared that the next step in the case would be an autopsy of Maffei to shed light on the causes of her death. Although he assured that the body showed no signs of violence, caution was maintained until the autopsy was completed. In a statement issued by the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Embassy of Mexico in Berlin, the Sanchez Castaneda family expressed their gratitude for the support received on both sides of the Atlantic. They especially thanked those who had volunteered for the search efforts and requested respect for their daughter's memory and privacy as they navigated the difficult circumstances of their loss. The painful chapter in the life of Maria Fernanda had come to an end. However, questions still lingered in the air. Pain and sadness spread throughout Mexico as news broke of the tragic end in the search for Maffei. Social media was filled with messages of comfort and wishes for eternal rest for her. Over 24,000 followers joined in a gesture of solidarity, while a feminist collective in Berlin and other volunteer groups also expressed their support with messages filled with love and strength. Politicians from various political streams in Mexico joined in the mourning, sending prayers, solidarity, and condolences to the parents, family, and friends of the young woman. The Secretary of Foreign Affairs in Mexico and current senator trusted that consular authorities would provide support to the family in this difficult time. The discovery of the body marked a new chapter in the investigation. It was known that the German authorities had received more than 120 leads about the young woman, and there were indications pointing to the days before her disappearance. But the situation remained secretive, and if there was any result from that part of the investigation, it is something that has not transpired. Although 2 weeks of intense search involved 500 people and covered more than 3,000 kilometers, there are still unanswered questions. According to Mexican media, the Maffei case brought to light a pending issue for the diplomatic representations of that country in Europe. Attention to mental health. The debate that opened highlighted that adapting to new cultural codes, discrimination, lack of support networks, and insecurity could deeply affect young people seeking a life abroad. The Mexican embassy in Germany reminded of the availability of a free window for access to mental health, while the Secretary of Foreign Affairs of Mexico offered tools a free psychological support platform for Mexicans in France and Monaco. A video shared by friends of Maffei, showing the young woman laughing and singing, reminded of her extroverted personality and all the vital energy that characterized her. That is why they asked for explanations to understand what really happened. On August 7th, 2 days after the discovery, Maffei's parents said that the Berlin police had not allowed them to identify their daughter's body. Sources close to the family confirmed that only the Berlin police had identified the 24-year-old young woman. The police statement reiterated that it could not be assumed that the young woman's death occurred due to the responsibility of third parties, but at the same time warned that the precise circumstances remained unclear. Media speculation was kept at bay, aware of the need to respect the official version. However, the police statement about Maffei's exceptional psychological situation and comments about her mental health raised suspicions about the true intention to investigate what happened to the last consequences. The how and why of her death were mysteries that tormented the Latin American community in Berlin. Attention was focused on the autopsy, a crucial step to dispel speculation. The most recent news occurred on August 9th and was published by a newspaper in Mexico, an informative medium that announced new delays in the autopsy. The newspaper managed to get answers from a spokesperson for the Berlin prosecutor's office, who announced that they would have to wait about 2 months to know the results of the autopsy, and that nothing is certain regarding the date of delivery of the body to the family. She pointed out that the autopsy had been ordered, but that it had not yet been carried out due to the workload and shortage of personnel. She added that it would take about 8 weeks before the result is available. Only from that moment can they think about releasing the body, but perhaps more investigations will be necessary before being able to deliver the remains to the family. The future of the investigation still does not seem to indicate immediate results. The repatriation of the body and the parents' decision on the final destination of Maffei depend on the results of the autopsy. The community cries out for clear answers and definitive closure, while the mystery surrounding the young student continues to weigh on the hearts of all those who followed her story with hope and much anguish. And well, that's it for today's case. As always, I appreciate your support for my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. This was another episode of Unreal True Crime. See you soon. Every day we coexist with evil. We witness the darkest side of human behavior. The suffering caused by one individual to others is something inherent in our society. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Lucas, and today I bring you another Unreal True Crime. The case of Morgan Chantel Nick. Morgan Chantel Nick was born to Morris and Colleen Nick in Ozark, Arkansas, on September 12, 1988. She was the couple's first child, and later, the family expanded with the birth of 2 more children. Morris was known to be a loving and kind father. Those who knew the couple said they embraced their parental responsibilities, doing everything in their power to make life easier for their children. Though Morris and Colleen initially seemed happy, challenges soon surfaced in their relationship. When Morgan was 6, they decided to separate, which ultimately led to a divorce. The process, however, was amicable, and they never fought over the custody of their children. The children primarily lived with Colleen, a devoted mother who always put her children first. Morgan and Colleen shared a close bond, spending most of their time together. Morgan excelled academically, despite her young age. Having just completed kindergarten, her family could already envision her thriving in elementary school. Personality-wise, Morgan was a shy child with a big heart. She loved apples and was fond of cats, leading her mother to allow her to have one as a pet. Despite her shyness, Morgan was actively involved as a Girl Scout and enjoyed playing with other kids. She dreamt of becoming a circus artist or a doctor when she grew up. On June 9, 1995, Colleen received an invitation from a friend to watch a minor league baseball game in Alma, Arkansas. Thinking Morgan might enjoy watching other kids play, she asked her to accompany her to the game, about 30 minutes away from their home. It was a night game, starting at 9 p.m. Upon arriving, the stands were already packed, but Colleen managed to find a spot for herself and Morgan. However, 6-year-old Morgan soon grew bored and began fidgeting with her shoelaces. Despite being a calm child, usually hesitant to engage with strangers, 2 older kids approached her. They introduced themselves as Jessica and Ty, aged 8 and 10 respectively. There are different accounts of what happened next. In one version, Morgan asked her mother if she could play with Jessica and Ty, but Colleen initially declined. Concerned about the unfamiliar surroundings and the packed venue of almost 300 people, Colleen was hesitant to let Morgan wander off. However, Colleen's friends urged her to let Morgan play, assuring her she was being overprotective and that Morgan would be fine. Eventually, Colleen relented. The kids mentioned wanting to run up a nearby hill to catch fireflies. With the game nearing its end around 10:30 p.m., Colleen allowed Morgan to go, but only for a short while. In another version, when Jessica and Ty invited Morgan to catch fireflies, Morgan's innate shyness made her decline. Yet Colleen's friends thought it would be good for Morgan to interact with other kids. Colleen then persuaded a reluctant Morgan to go with them, even if it meant leaving her mother's side. What's certain is Morgan left the stands with the 2 children. While Colleen tried to keep an eye on them, she got distracted when the baseball game ended and teams came into the stands to greet their families. The next time Colleen looked for the children, she saw Jessica and Ty returning without Morgan. Concerned, she immediately asked them about her daughter's whereabouts. They replied that the girl had disappeared while everyone was emptying sand from their shoes, leaning against Colleen's car. Subsequent investigations revealed that while Jessica and Ty sat at the front of the vehicle shaking out their shoes, Morgan was alone at the back emptying hers. Another significant and worrying detail was that the children insisted they saw a creepy man talking to Morgan before she vanished. Confused and anxious, Colleen immediately raised the alarm, and the adults present at the baseball field helped her search the nearby areas for her missing daughter. However, hours passed in the search without results, and Colleen decided to report the incident to the local police. Those who knew Colleen highlighted her kind nature and how she was always willing to help those in need. Therefore, when she needed support in searching for her child, many showed their solidarity. Additionally, being a devoted mother who always looked out for her children made the community even more outraged at the kidnapper or kidnappers who took Morgan away from her family. On the day she disappeared, Morgan was a beautiful girl with blonde hair and blue eyes. Before going to the baseball game with her mother, she had attended her Girl Scouts activities and was wearing the organization's green shirt, blue denim shorts, and white tennis shoes. Another distinguishing feature of the young girl was that she had 5 silver crowns on her molars, a type of cap used to cover and protect a damaged tooth, which were easily visible. When the police were informed of the disappearance, they immediately began their investigation. Officers and local volunteers organized numerous search mobilizations, while detectives went door to door seeking evidence and witnesses. Since Jessica and Ty claimed to have seen a man speaking with Morgan before her disappearance, the police compiled a detailed description of the suspect, who was said to be between 23 and 38 years old with black hair sprinkled with gray, and he had a mustache and beard. Witnesses also reported seeing a faded red pickup truck nearby with a mismatched white camper shell that seemed too small by a couple of inches. They noticed possible damage to the back right corner of the vehicle. Some claimed the truck had Arkansas license plates, but the plate number wasn't recorded. Additionally, upon reviewing home videos recorded at the baseball field, investigators confirmed the existence of the suspect and the aforementioned red truck. However, unfortunately, the recordings were too grainy to provide a clear image of his face. Once Colleen reported Morgan's disappearance, she called her ex-husband and informed him of the situation. Morris seemed devastated by his daughter's disappearance and expressed willingness to cooperate with law enforcement. Surprisingly, during the initial investigation, the girl's father became a potential suspect as some evidence suggested he acted as a low-level drug dealer. He also reportedly had a criminal history, including assault and property damage charges. From the beginning of the investigation, Colleen was willing to cooperate with law enforcement in every way because her only wish was for her daughter to return safely. However, when investigators initially suspected Morris, her ex-husband, of being involved in Morgan's disappearance, she felt the police were making a grave mistake. She defended him, claiming he would never harm their children. Fortunately, the police soon ruled out Morris as a person of interest and focused their attention on Clifford Joe Pullen, rumored to be his drug supplier. This individual had a criminal record, and in addition to being arrested for marijuana possession, he had also been charged with first-degree rape of a minor in 1995, suggesting he might be capable of kidnapping. Nevertheless, authorities quickly cleared Clifford of any suspicion and stated he was not involved in Morgan's disappearance. Although the police received numerous leads at the time, none led to Morgan, and months, and then years went by. During this period, information from Albert Harvey, a resident of Stuttgart, Arkansas, seemed promising. He claimed he had seen a man fitting the suspect's description with a blonde child trying to enter his truck. Interestingly, Albert was able to identify the suspect from the sketch, and the police used all their resources to scour the area. However, as hours went by without any leads, law enforcement began to doubt his claims. They subjected Albert to 2 polygraph tests, which he failed, and he eventually admitted to lying. The case went cold, and as time passed, the search was no longer for a 6-year-old girl, so the existing photos of Morgan seemed insufficient. To provide a solution, in February 2001, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released an age-progressed photo showing what Morgan might look like at 12 years old. The intention behind such photographs was to widely disseminate an updated image of Morgan. This way, if someone spotted a teenager resembling the image, they could alert authorities to verify if she was the girl abducted in 1995. Leads in the case were dwindling. Although police vowed that they wouldn't stop working the case until they found Morgan, the trail was growing cold. Searches would continue to be held sporadically, and detectives still followed up on every tip they received, but nothing brought them any closer to finding Morgan. The next lead came in January 2002, when a tip led investigators to search a property in Logan County, Arkansas. A witness claimed that Morgan was buried there. This testimony was so detailed and specific that the police acted on it. However, despite using search dogs and scouring the area thoroughly, nothing was found. On August 14, 2005, ABC's Extreme Makeover, Home Edition, and John Walsh, co-founder of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, addressed the topic of missing children, highlighting Morgan's abduction. Colin and Morgan's siblings received a new home after their family home was damaged by a water heater explosion. In November 2010, federal investigators searched a vacant house in Sparrow, Oklahoma, after receiving a tip from a confidential informant. Sparrow was about 25 miles from Alma, and the property they searched had once belonged to a convicted child molester who was currently in jail. Although investigators had nothing linking the man to Morgan's disappearance, they searched through the home looking for possible DNA evidence that might indicate Morgan had been there. Unfortunately, they didn't uncover anything related to the case. In August 2012, two convicts, identified as Tonya Smith and James Monhart, were accused of trying to buy some of Morgan's personal documents, including her social security number and birth certificate. While they were found guilty of document forgery, investigations determined they weren't involved in Morgan's disappearance. On December 18, 2017, police conducted another search on a property in Sparrow. Some reports said it was for an unrelated investigation, while others believed it was connected to Morgan's case. Notably, the search dogs signaled to a well on the property, which then became the focus of the search. After an intense 24-hour search, investigators left the property without finding any evidence. In November 2021, detectives identified Billy Jack Links as a potential suspect in Morgan Nick's abduction. An Arkansas resident, Billy was a registered sex offender who had been in and out of prison since 1992. Reports suggest he had a typical upbringing, with no apparent signs of deviance. He served in the U.S. Army during World War and later worked for an airline in Dallas before returning to Arkansas. Despite seemingly staying out of trouble, he was arrested and charged with sexual offenses in 1992. 2 months after Morgan's 1995 disappearance, Billy attempted to kidnap an 11-year-old girl only 8 miles from where Morgan vanished. Witnesses reported he drove a red pickup truck, aligning with descriptions from Morgan's case. A week after Billy's arrest, investigators searched his truck, finding hair, fibers, a mesh sheet, rope, a tarp, insulation tape, and blood on one of the seats. The samples were stored for future analysis, but it's unclear if they were tested then. Shortly after his arrest, Arkansas State Police and the FBI tried to question him about Morgan's case, but he invoked his right to an attorney and refused to talk. Regarding the 11-year-old he tried to kidnap, Billy proclaimed his innocence, but he was convicted of sexual solicitation and sentenced to 6 years in prison in 1995. Billy remained behind bars until his sudden illness and death on August 5, 2000. In 2021, a news channel aired a documentary titled Still Missing Morgan. Arkansas police mentioned they were still seeking information about the red truck with an attached white cabin. The documentary led to over 200 new tips, but none have resolved the case. The revelation about Billy Jack Links was the last major update, but Morgan's disappearance remains an active investigation, with the police continuously receiving tips. Meanwhile, Coleman pleads with law enforcement to follow every lead, refusing to rest until his daughter is found, hoping for her safe return. This case has profoundly impacted Arkansas and even influenced the naming of the Amber Alert. The Amber Alert system began in 1996 after the disappearance of Amber Hagerman in Arlington, Texas. Amber is an acronym for America's Missing Broadcast Emergency Response, managed under the Department of Justice. The Morgan Nick Amber Alert is Arkansas's name for the program designed to alert the public when a child goes missing. This program is a joint effort between local law enforcement, media outlets, and civic groups to raise awareness about potential abductions, thereby increasing the chances of locating the missing child. Activating the Morgan Nick Alert involves the participation of all Arkansas law enforcement agencies, along with more than 250 local radio stations, TV networks, and other media outlets. This information is quickly disseminated to all parties, enabling them to broadcast details about a possible abduction widely. As of 2023, the case remains unsolved. Since Morgan's disappearance in 1995, her father, Morris, has opted for privacy, preferring not to discuss his daughter's case publicly. In contrast, Morgan's mother, Coleman, is vocal about her ongoing efforts to bring Morgan home. Coleman lives in Alma, Arkansas, where she runs the Morgan Nick Foundation, assisting families dealing with abductions or missing persons. Beyond advocating for these families, Coleman spreads awareness about daily dangers faced by children and offers detailed resources to help parents and teachers understand online safety basics and parental control apps. Despite extensive investigations that have yielded thousands of leads, there is still no concrete information on Morgan's whereabouts. The FBI and local communities have offered a reward of $60,000 for information leading to the recovery of Morgan Nick and the identification, arrest, and conviction of those responsible for her kidnapping. Thank you for supporting my work. Please subscribe, like, and share this video. See you next time on Unreal True Crime. Goodbye.